So yeah, as you can see by the title, there's been some switching going on, and what I'm talking about, of course, is switching my editing workflow for not only stills but also video work to the iPad or iPhone. And I've done a video on this, and I did this back earlier this year, probably in January, when I actually decided that I wanted to try this whole switch thing and see how it worked. And today we're going to talk about that because over the last 8 months, there have been a lot of changes. We have a new OS for iPad. There have been some changes just to iOS 13 in general, and I've had some hardware changes that I've switched around with that have actually made this whole process even easier. And many of you have commented, Ted, why don't you just use a laptop? Well, laptops are wonderful and they are very portable, but this is even more so. And I promise anyone who's tried to sit in a coach class seat on an airplane to edit video know that a laptop gets really big really quick. There's like no room to move, and as soon as you need to plug in a drive or something to get files off of it, it's just like super cramped. The other reason is that I use this not only when I'm on the road, but also when I'm at home. I'm not chained to the studio here, so I don't have to sit here and edit at the desk 12 hours a day. I can move to the living room, I can go to a coffee shop. It makes me much more mobile, and mobile means that I'm more productive, and that is the big key here. Now, as I mentioned in the previous video, by far the biggest challenge in a mobile workflow like this, at least in the Apple ecosystem, is getting your files from your camera to the device, whether this is an iPad or your iPhone. Now, Android have had this functionality for a long time now, and Apple have finally come to the party, and with iOS 13, we actually have a dedicated OS for the iPad, which is something that they've needed because the iPad is something that lives somewhere between the phone and an actual computer. You have a bigger screen, you're able to do more with it, and this speaks volumes to Apple as well. The processing power they have with their processors now is very efficient and it's very powerful, and I think that it rivals desktop computers, and this is actually good because you're going to pay almost as much as you are for a real laptop or a real computer. So that's the challenge, is how do you get files from a camera after you've captured them to the device? And this is where an intermediary device has come into play. So I swear I literally have been the test pilot for you guys on every option that's available. The first thing I started with was the obvious. You go to the Apple Store and you buy this extremely overpriced adapter that will take an SD card, so you can take your files, you can put them in here, and this will plug into your iPad or your phone and you can transfer them that way. The problem is this is SD card, so what if you have an XQD card or something that's a little different, like let's say you own a Nikon Z6 or Z7, this ain't going to handle it. Which actually brings me to another realization that I had about this process. If you're going from an SD card just straight to your tablet or your phone, I don't think a tablet or a phone is really a good place to store data. It can get lost, it can get stolen, and it's not really designed for media management. And so that's when I realized there's a number of different things on the market that might be able to make this a little easier and faster. So like most people, I started with the cheapest device that I could find, which is this RAV power device. There's no drive in here. All this is a Wi-Fi connection that you can put an SD card into. And this enables you to just basically have a wireless version of this, although it was pretty bad. And as much as RAV power make really good batteries, that's probably what they should stick to. Then I bought this, which is the WD My Passport Wireless SSD. What this does is it has an SSD hard drive inside, and you can actually put your SD card in here and it will back up while it's in your camera bag or your backpack, and then you can wirelessly transfer your files from this over to your iPad or phone in theory. The codec support on here for video is extremely bad. It's not very fast, despite the fact that they put an SSD in here for some reason. You're not going to get speeds that are going to take advantage of the SSD in any way, so this was kind of a flop. Then I came to this drive, which is made by LaCie, and it's actually co-branded with DJI. It's the LaCie DJI Copilot. I think the marketing move there was that people who fly drones and want a way to back up their footage while they're out in the field have a way to do so. Of course, it just takes an SD card, so it doesn't matter whether it was shot on a drone or not. And this is what I've used for the better part of the year, and I like this option because it is a wired connection. So it comes with 3 different cables. There's a Lightning, a USB-C, and a generic USB cable, and you can plug this into whatever device you have. The software is supported on both Android and Apple. It's a little bit kludgy to use, but even with the wired connection, it's a little bit slow, and I actually ran into trouble this year when I was on the road, forgot the cable, and had to go to B&H, and I found this obscure cable made by somebody who makes music software that I thought would work, got back, it fit into both devices, but it didn't work. So proprietary cables that you can forget. Now that's not LaCie's fault, that's my fault, it's user error, but it was one more thing that just kind of put a kink in everything. And then comes along this device, which is made by Gnarbox. This is the Gnarbox version 2.0. I was at Sony Condo a month or so ago, and I ran into two of the guys from Gnarbox that were at the event. It was Matt, the CEO, and Dan, who works at Gnarbox. And they both had seen my previous video, and they said, hey, we really like what you're doing, but why didn't you try Gnarbox? And the reason that I hadn't tried Gnarbox initially, this was right after the first of the year. Gnarbox version 1 had been out. It was getting really hard to find, and I knew they were doing their Kickstarter for the second version, so I was really kind of in between versions on the whole thing. But as I talked to them, they were addressing some of the complaints that I had. I knew they had actually watched the video. They said, you really should try this thing. So I got the Gnarbox version 2. This was on a Friday. It had been a long week, but I thought, I want to run some tests anyway. Powered it up, paired it with my iPad. It was unbelievably easy to use. I downloaded their software. It's like really well written, better than anybody else that's done anything for both Android and Apple. I mean, it works on any device that you want. Then I ran a test. I put about 10 gigabytes of footage on here. I knew how long that takes to do on the LaCie/DJI. I moved this over to the iPad wirelessly and had to double check everything. It's like significantly faster. So I want to show you some things about Gnarbox today, but it's one thing to tell you that it was significantly faster. It's another thing to do some tests. But let's back up real quick for just a second, because I want to talk about what the Gnarbox is. So Gnarbox is a small, lightweight, weatherproof black box that has a hard drive inside. In fact, the hard drive they use on here is an NVMe, and these are found on higher-end laptops. It's an SSD drive. They are very small and very fast. You open the door on the side, you pop in an SD card, you close it. When you power on the device, it will detect the SD card and it will automatically make a backup. It takes it one step further, and you can control the file structure that it has. So if you have ever worked with Sony cameras, for instance, you know that if you shoot 4K video, your videos are buried deep inside this massive file structure, and you got to know where they're found. Well, you can actually program Gnarbox just to make files for different, or make folders for different kinds of file types. So all of your JPEGs are in one folder, all of your RAWs are in one folder, all of your videos are in one folder. It actually is easier to use. It also runs an MD5 check on the original drive just to make sure everything copied without getting corrupted and you have a good solid backup. The other thing that Gnarbox has is an Intel CPU. It's also got a 4-core Intel GPU. It's got removable batteries. Well, this starts to sound like a computer, and it kind of is, because there's other functionality that you can do with Gnarbox as well. For instance, this will automate things. So let's say that you shoot video and you shoot MP4 files. Well, it's a great codec to shoot with, but it's not necessarily the smoothest thing to edit in Premiere. So you want to transcode your footage to something else. Let's say you want to transcode it to ProRes 422. This will actually do that. So after it's backed up your footage, it will actually transcode and make copies of all your video files. Now, why is this important? Well, that's normally something you have to come back to the studio to do. You have to set up a computer to do it, and it takes time to do. Well, if you're out in the field, you've just shot your video, you've backed up your card, you tell this to start transcoding, the battery on here will last 4 to 6 hours. You put this back in your bag, and it's transcoding while you're on the way back to the studio, so you're already saving time. The automation feature alone is worth it. Another thing that you can automate is backups. So you've already made one backup to this. This actually has Dropbox functionality, and this is wonderful for still shooters. So if you want to make a second backup, you back up your first card, and you, as long as this is on a Wi-Fi network, it will start uploading files to Dropbox. So that's going to save you another step too. And the fact that all this runs on the background on something that's not a laptop or device you have to have on and powered up, you can leave it in your bag. You're getting things out of the way, and this is going to free up time later. This really is the Cadillac of backup devices, but I also think it's kind of essential to have this in your workflow. And the reason is, earlier I mentioned that I'm not a big fan of letting files live on an iPad or an iPhone. There's obvious things like you can just lose the device, it can get stolen, you leave it on an airplane. But more than that, it's like those devices aren't built for data management and file management, and so it's kind of an extra step, and it becomes kludgy to do that. What Gnarbox enables me to do is actually put everything into a folder automatically. Then when I get back to the studio, I can very quickly go into my desktop computer and I can get all these files onto the RAID system. out. I can edit freely on phones or iPads or whatever, but I'm not worried about those files as being final copies. They're just basically edit copies. And as many of you know, that's another thing is storage management on these devices. If you don't have a ton of storage on your iPad, it can the real estate can get somewhat precious, let's just say. So you can better manage your files if that's not the only copy that's living in there. In other words, I'm afraid to delete these files because I haven't put them on the RAID or haven't put them on a computer yet, and I don't want to lose them permanently, and then you're not working anymore, and that's kind of a problem. So let's talk about speed for just a second, because this is one of the biggest bottlenecks in this type of a workflow, is getting your files from your camera to your device. And this could be a ton of images, it could be video, it depends on how hard you're pushing it, how much you're shooting. I shoot a lot of 4K video, and I've noticed that that's where the biggest time consumption comes from. In fact, I pretty much do all of my video shooting in 4K. And as I mentioned, I know what this workflow is like with the LumaFusion DJI Copilot because I've spent a good part of the year with that. I know that I'm going to leave that to transfer while I'm not doing anything else. It's kind of a drag when you're sitting on an airplane, you're ready to edit, you're moving your files, but I do know that it's slow. The night that I got the Gnarbox in the mail, I noticed that this was exponentially faster. And so what I wanted to do was do some tests, because just to tell you it's faster is one thing. So what I did is I took some video files, and so this is about 10 minutes of footage. In fact, it's exactly 10 minutes of footage because I timed it out, and it's about 7.7 gigabytes. Now, with the LumaFusion DJI Copilot, this is a wired connection, so theoretically this should be faster than using wireless. Well, it's not, and it took about 5 minutes and 10 seconds to copy 7.7 gigabytes of data, or 10 minutes of footage. So that's 5 minutes of time to copy 10 minutes of video. That's significant, and most projects you have a lot more than 10 minutes of video. And if you're using the LumaFusion app, you can actually see over in the corner how fast it's going, and it's capping out at around 25 megabits a second. If you're on a Lightning port iPad, this will go up to about 30, but it's still really slow either way. Now, if we move that over and try it with the Gnarbox. Now, with the Gnarbox, you do have a Wi-Fi connection. It's 5 gigahertz. You connect to that, and what's really cool is you save a step because you can import directly into LumaFusion if you're using that for video editing. You can also import directly into Lightroom if you're using that for your images. And so this example is in LumaFusion, and so if we go in here, we select Gnarbox, I start copying, and the Wi-Fi connection, which is what we're connected to, took 3 minutes and 39 seconds. So it wasn't quite half, but it was significantly faster. And we're comparing Wi-Fi connection to a wired connection. So I'm saying the Wi-Fi on Gnarbox is better than the wired connection on the LumaFusion unit. Now, because that's not really fair, I'm comparing Wi-Fi, even though that shouldn't have been faster. What's the wired connection like? Now, one of the cool things about Gnarbox is you can actually change the USB configuration in the settings. So you go down and you select USB. You can do USB mass transfer, or you can do a USB-C Ethernet connection. This is really cool. If you select this, it's going to reboot the entire device into USB-C. And then when I transfer files, it's going to actually do it over the USB-C cable, and this took 2 minutes and 90 seconds wired. Now, I think there's still a limitation. It's not on Gnarbox's end, it's on Apple's end, and I don't know exactly what it is. I have been told before that because this USB-C cable is a powered cable, that data transfer is somewhat sharing the connection with that. I'm not sure what it is, but it'll be interesting to see where we go forward with this. But either way, the Gnarbox is way faster, and if you don't have a cable, you can do it wirelessly in just about half the time. Another thing that's unique to Gnarbox that you don't see on any of the other devices that I've shown you is the ability to have interchangeable batteries. This is really nice if you're doing a lot of work on the field, or if you're traveling and you don't want to bring a power cable with you, you can bring extra batteries. Those don't have them. Those have to be plugged back into the wall when they die. This doesn't. And so what's really cool is the battery efficiency on here. It's a 3,000 milliamp hour battery. In terms of performance, you're going to get 4 to 6 hours of on time using the Gnarbox. And to charge one of these, it takes probably about an hour to get it 80% and 2 hours to get it the full 100%. So battery efficiency is excellent on this device. And another thing that I think is worth mentioning, Gnarbox are a small company. They're nowhere near the size of the competitors who make the products that I've showed you also in this video. This is a huge testament. Not only is their software development, their user interface, everything is just so much more consistent and so much better, but they also make a product that does way more in terms of features than what the competition is offering. And I think this is a huge testament to the passion that these guys have. It's a small company that likes making awesome things. This last year has been pretty incredible in terms of the possibilities that have been opened, not only from the software level, but on the hardware level of what we're able to do working in a mobile type situation. Is it perfect? No, but we're finally starting to see the realization that I think was there from day one. Devices like this make my job easier. They enable me more time at the end of the day. They enable me to be more efficient in getting the job that I need to do done, and I think that is the most important thing. I'm going to do some more videos on my mobile setup. I know this was pretty much done with something that I'm very excited about today, but I want to hear from you and what you would like to see me cover, so drop me a comment below. I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, later.